So what has persuaded you to come out today?
Well, we've driven up, my son and I, from Newbury because obviously we can see the state of the nation and there's a national emergency and we need to obviously think about the future. What kind of country are we going to have for our children? Or are we going to have a nation at all?
Yeah, that's a very good point. At this rate, immigration continues unchecked. You're not going to have countries anywhere in Europe. It's just going to be one big mess.
Now, I'd rather live in a nation and not a market.
And that's the goal of Brussels, the EU, by the way, to erase nation states. I mean, everywhere like France, UK, Germany speak different languages. How do you unite countries that speak different language into one bureaucratic mess, one undemocratic bureaucratic mess? Well, you flood them with immigrants that don't speak French, German, or English. And if everyone doesn't speak any language and there's no common language, well, it's just one big mess and it can be the EU.
Not a borderless international supermarket browsed by mutually hostile strangers. Not something that reduces us all to bargain hunters. We need to save the nation, and I think that Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain is the only credible vehicle to do that.
I agree. It's the only party to do that. In the past, Reform had some potential, but then Farage said, we can't do mass deportations. We can't get rid. Yes, and he said that, and now, yeah, he's done as an alternative. That's the sad thing. It's he used to be Farage, like Restore Britain, but then he got co-opted, and like Trump internationally, first term great, second term he got co-opted. So by the time we can get someone non-establishment in, they get partly co-opted, and so we need to get someone else. It's sad.
What was it that made you come over? What were the issues that pulled you to Restore, and what was the moment?
Well, you can see that there's obviously there's the bankruptcy of the general liberal idea. There's the fact that you get a sense that the Western idea and the ideas we've had since the Second World War are winding down themselves. And at the same time, you can't escape the fact that we appear to be morally as well as financially bankrupt across the West.
I'm just looking at the reporter and thinking, that's not some British person. Why are they in Britain?
Across Europe and in Britain, that the whole system is in a form of crisis. If you like, what we used to call normal life has been replaced by a permanent state of emergency in terms of our social incohesion, in terms of demographic change, in terms of the fact that there appear to be no realistic solutions offered, and whoever you vote for, the same mad policies get continued throughout your life, and that's what I've...
Yes, it doesn't matter. You'd think that the Conservatives, after Brexit, would control immigration, like the people of Britain want, but no.
In the last 30 years, and if it goes on, we're finished.
So what does finished look like?
What does finished look like?
And yes, you do need Restore, because the establishment is going to resist like controlling immigration to the very end and mass deportations. You need to vote for someone extreme enough so that when they fight with establishment, something will actually happen. If you vote for someone like Farage and Reform, by the time they've compromised with the establishment, Labour and Conservatives, they're going to just barely maybe decrease migration a little bit, and not maybe do a few token deportations. No, you need someone like Restore who is going to go hard, and like that something actually gets accomplished. Like Trump. What he's doing, yes, he's deporting in America, but it's nowhere near as much as most people want. You have 80% of people that are in favor of getting illegals out of the country, and you have him pussyfooting around in Minnesota because some screaming liberals try to protest.
Finished looks like an economic collapse. Finished looks like spending all your money on foreign wars when nothing works in the country. Finished looks like you can't get a job for being competent. There's no sanity even in recruitment. We have a competency crisis because for increasingly ideological and insane reasons, employment opportunities, even training opportunities are restricted. In
America, there are, because of slavery, whatever, there's historically, yes, a minority population that's colored, and you can at least make the case for a lot of these things. But in Britain, there's no slavery. There's no huge slavery population. So having DEI policies in Britain, that means Instead of hiring a British people, you go look to someone who's immigrated to the country because they're colored to hire them for DEI reasons. It's insane. It's fucking over the people of the country and there's no historical justification for it.
There's one news story after another about why, for political reasons, we're doing mad things that bankrupt the country, that basically park people's careers, that exclude talented people of genuine principle from any area of influence whatsoever. And taken collectively, this is the politics and economics of national suicide.
And it's not just hiring diverse people. There's also the ideological constraints on hiring. They're going to hire people that support DEI. And so you have to vocalize, like, we need to hire people of different races, whatever, and to get a job at some of these corporations, you have to virtue signal that you hate your own nation, you hate whiteness, and it's insane, the current world.
So it has to stop. And there's increasingly a sense, not just in Britain, but throughout the West, that something has to change. And I think that's only going to build as we begin to see the devastating consequences of the latest round of reckless warmongering in the Middle East, which we should never have been involved in, but we're all going to have to live with those consequences. And from this summer on, we're going to see how bitter they are. And it's only going to get...
For the record, if the UK Prime Minister, and the rest of Europe had pushed hard on not doing Iran, Trump would have backed down. No matter what he says publicly, no political pressure was put on Trump to avoid the Iran war and the devastating consequences for Europe right now. It's going to be one of the places hardest hit, especially next winter, in terms of natural gas.
Worse unless we change the system. And there's no real change that's offered by the parties of the forced consensus. That was the liberal establishment after the Second World War, and it doesn't work anymore, and it hasn't produced the utopia it's promised. It's produced a sort of hell on earth, from which there seems to be no way out. But there is. There are people of genuine principle and genuine talent in this country. And the reason why so many people despair of that is because I think they've been systematically excluded from positions of power, influence, and professional advantage for ideological reasons that has bankrupted the country. But we have enormous human capital.
I mean, UK shows, they are as diverse as American shows, which makes no bloody sense, the amount of black actors in UK shows. They don't have the same size black population in UK as the United States. Why are they trying to have, like 20-30% black people in UK shows when they're only a sliver of the population? It's insane.
Here. We're just not permitted to release it, because if you don't have the correct views, you don't get the...
Because the overrepresentation of blacks means the underrepresentation of Britons that have been in Britain for hundreds of years.
You don't get any promotion. In fact, you might be harassed off social media and find yourself debanked, or at least your career is stymied. So what we need is a realistic economy, some return of human dignity to every area of life. Because, as I said, it hasn't just financially...
And the left's response to all this is, this guy's racist!
...bankrupted us. It's morally bankrupted us too. And we're looking at a state where you're going to live in a borderless international bazaar, a placelessness, if you like, an international nowhere land.
I've seen the YouTube videos of YouTubers that go to, like, the Eiffel Tower and other touristy destinations, and it's like Morocco. It's like, and as a kid, I went to Paris, and I also went to Morocco, and now Paris is Morocco. There are endless people of African descent trying to scam you and sell you trinkets near the Eiffel Tower. I mean, you go to the Eiffel Tower to experience French culture, to visit France, you didn't go to France to visit Morocco.
Where nothing means anything. Nowhere seems like home. And where the essential value of human life is replaced with price, such as we see in awful things like surrogacy or 0 hours contracts, or the increasing degradation of, what you call a work-life balance. Finally, how many people actually do work? How many people are now dependent on the state, directly or indirectly, to the point where those people exceed the ability of the nation to actually make money? This is an economic doom spiral. And so the more that you look at the problem, the more you realise that really we are facing a national...
The problem is, not only do they let in these endless migrations, and this is the most evil part, they put them up in hotels. Free food, free lodging. And then these people, since they don't have to pay for their food or lodging, they're willing to work far less than any Briton is, because Britons have to pay for their food and lodging. So you're forcing Britons, the poorest Britons, the ones that don't have can't apply to white-collar jobs, to compete with African migrants that don't have to pay for their food or housing. How in the world are the poorest people in the UK supposed to do that? There's no way. I mean, you're talking about people willing to work for $10,000 a year because they don't have to pay for their food or lodging. And that's not a living wage anywhere in the UK. It's insane.
An emergency. And if you are going to take on the duties of the state, something more than self-interest or printing money for your own political friends, we need to do better than that. We need to take seriously the depth of the crisis that we're in, and we need...
Right now, you have one of the most unpopular UK prime ministers in history, and he has no intention of leaving anytime soon, and he's leading the UK in the direction that most UK doesn't want, like more migration, war with Russia, not stopping the war in the Middle East and letting fuel prices and energy prices soar. It's a disaster. It's not, you can't call that a democracy anymore.
People of genuine principle and talent to address that, and I think we've found them under Rupert Lowe and in Restore Britain.
And so, do you believe that essentially it's the rhetoric of blood, sweat and tears that we need in this country?
No, I don't think we need any rhetoric at all. You see, that's partly the problem. For the last century, we've been ruled by the political technique of the liberal system, which is basically the rule by media. And what you do then is you use slogans and you use concepts and you attach people's...
If you control the media, you have enormous control over democracy. And if you're the United States, as these global media arms that broadcast everywhere across the world, you can influence elections everywhere. And you can just put your neoliberal ideas or anything you want and broadcast that to the people. And you can propagandize people into believing things that are against their interests. Like immigration is great. It doesn't increase like crime and sexual assaults and stuff like that. And that's one layer. Then the next layer is they can control the candidates, because candidates you don't like, you can smear them. Candidates that are completely corrupt and willing to do what you want and betray the people, well, you elevate those candidates. So the layers and layers of propaganda and fucking over the people, and you get outcomes that are completely undemocratic. The reason this is finally all collapsing is because the media's control is collapsing. You have free acts, you have popular commentators like Asmongold just covering the truth, and so the media's propagandizing isn't working. It's half as effective as it used to be. And just that alone is collapsing the entire system.
Hopes and dreams, basically, to messages for products that you're never going to deliver. That's how we're ruled. We are sold dreams. Our desires are stimulated by, if you like, the kind of ruling consensus. But none of these things ever happen. And instead, what happens is what the elites want to happen.
Best example is Brexit and migration. People voted for Brexit. The primary reason was to control migration. Then you had a conservative government, which supposedly is the anti-immigration party, but it's establishment, and it does what the deep state in the United States wants, and just lets migration happen. What the EU wants, what Brussels wants, to try to erase European identities of individual countries by overwhelming them with migrants that don't speak the local language and don't have any local loyalties.
And so we get involved in these terrible economic doom spirals. We see the quality of our lives degraded as margins are shaved. Everything's subject to shrinkflation now. It's not just your chocolate bars that are getting small.
Everything is smaller in the supermarket and more expensive.
Smaller. It's the value of your wages. It's your ability to earn a living. It's the kind of job that you have to do so. Usually a kind of dignity-free environment, right, where you're slowly choked to death by the lanyard and its terms and conditions. So if we have just more empty rhetoric, we're not going to get anywhere. You need credible people of genuine integrity and experience and ability, who are committed to some higher purpose than themselves, than their own personal enrichment or their own mad ideological faction.
It'd be great if we had politicians like that, but thing is, they get driven out of politics when we rarely get them, like Massey in the United States. Honest politicians are poison to the system we have today, and so they're driven out at the earliest possible opportunity.
We need a sense of higher purpose to see beyond the predicament that the rule by media has delivered us into, because it's delivered us all into a fantasy world that's turned out to be a nightmare. And those adverts, if you like, for that system that Francis Fukuyama described as the end of history, the liberal system, he said, periodic elections plus cheap consumer goods. And that was the final verdict on the organisation of mankind, and we could never do any better. Well, it hasn't delivered, has it? The elections have delivered political paralysis in Britain and in France and in Germany, the major powers of Europe. And so what's that electoral system doing? It's ground to a halt. And the economics of this...
Yeah, he's better than 99% of the politicians we have in the UK.
If you ask Conservatives who basically market worshippers, if you sit next to them and say, look, you've destroyed our nation, replaced it with a series of light industrial sheds increasingly staffed by third world migrant labour, what has that conserved? It's demolished everything. Everything that they claim to believe in about Burke and his little platoons, about traditional communities and traditional values, has basically been suborned to market worship and pure profit. We need something more than money. We need something more than empty ideological slogans. We need real change for people's real lives, for a change. And I think the crisis that the West generally is facing, politically, diplomatically, morally and financially, gives you the opportunity to make the kind of deep-rooted change that you need.
It will. I have said eventually, sometime within the next 5 to 10 years, the dollar is going to collapse, bring down the EU with it, and there's going to be radical change across all these countries. Widespread real anger too, and there'll be a lot of deportations.
To save the nation.
And where is it you think that reform has fallen into, these traps are falling for this? Because obviously you've chosen restore over reform.
Yeah.
And you've already mentioned the Iran war, and they obviously want to back the Americans.
Well, this is a difficult question to approach if you're not the kind of sad person with no life like me who actually gets into this. But the Americans didn't choose that war freely on their own, did they? They've admitted severally, their own chief diplomat, Mark.
They were tricked into it, rather than being coerced, is my opinion. Trump was promised another Venezuela, a 3-day war that makes him look good. And he didn't understand the potential risks.
Rubio and many others, the leader of the House and so on, have said that this was a war for Israel because Israel was going to launch that war. And so the real fundamental question is who basically rules the United States.
It was a war for Israel, and Trump probably, knew that, but he thought it was throwing them a bone. That's what he thought. He thought, it's a little Venezuela for Israel, a 3-day war just to keep them happy. Like he did in his first time, moving the embassy to Jerusalem and stuff like that. A token thing to repay the millions he got from Jewish donors. He didn't understand he was completely fucking over his presidency by starting this war. He's not that much an Israeli puppet. He would not, if he had understood all the consequences, he would not have launched a war. It was ignorance and wishful thinking on his part about how the war would develop, and it was doing Israel a small favor, he thought, Trump. And he was so misguided.
Because that war is definitely not in the national interest of the Americans. In fact, I personally predicted this along with others at the beginning of January. This has led to a strategic defeat of the United States.
I said it from the very first day that this was a disaster for the United States, and it was.
It's broken its military presence, its credibility. It's now seen as agreement incapable. That means in diplomacy, nobody believes your promises. So no one's going to make any deals with you because you constantly break them. And what's worse with that, you then assassinate the people that you were trying to make the agreements with in the first place. Yep. Incidentally, the Straits were open before you did this, and you killed the man who placed a religious prohibition on the development of nuclear weapons, And then your big idea is to bomb everybody so they love you. I mean, this is insane.
Absolutely batshit insane.
It doesn't make sense. There's no interest in the national interest at the political elite level in the West, whether it's in the United States or whether it's in Britain or whether it's in Europe. And that's the reason why these political parties are seeing themselves decline dramatically in popularity because they're not delivering for their own people. The way that they rule is for the interests of the rulers, not the ruled. And you can see that there because these wars are mad. And it's not just the Iran war. These wars are mad from the point of view of the national interest of any Western nation because it didn't deliver anything for.
Same thing with Ukraine. Europe cut itself off from cheap Russian oil, which was the fuel of their economies, to wage war against Russia. I'm not going to go into details, but it was a provoked war. Russia didn't choose it. It was the EU that provoked the war in Ukraine and cut themselves off purposefully from cheap Russian oil. And that's now going to be gone forever because of Putin's visit to China. They've now inked or close to inking new pipeline deals. And the cheap oil that went to Europe before is now going to go to China, and it's never going to come to Europe again. The leaders in Europe have fucked over Europe to just an unbelievable extent.
For them other than misery and chaos. And in fact, if you look into the history of regime change, not only did it come about because of Benjamin Netanyahu saying that he wanted the West to replace diplomacy with a war on terror from 1979, but when it went on to do this, what did it produce? The reason we have a mass migration crisis in Europe is because of the wars in the Middle East.
Yes, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and the genocide of Christians in Syria, which CIA and Mossad funded, armed, and organized. Yeah, through ISIS. It's crazy.
That the United States has wholeheartedly fought, which serves only the grand strategy of the Israelis. That's the reason why you had millions of people come into Europe in 2015 from Syria. That's the reason why, as Colonel Gaddafi predicted in 2010, he went on French television and said, if you kill me, Europe will turn black. And then in Operation Odyssey Dawn, when they did kill him, when Hillary Clinton and David Cameron killed Gaddafi, rather brutally, Europe did turn black because Libya was a gateway that wasn't open then, and so was Syria. And then
a gateway that needs to be closed. Ships coming across the Mediterranean people should be collected and sent back. You can't come to Europe illegally.
So was Iraq. And so when you smash these countries, what happens? People flee and routes are established, and that becomes a business. Mass migration is a criminal enterprise. It's a racket. People pay thousands of dollars to be shipped into your country. This becomes a parallel economy. It's part of the corrupting influence of the business of mass destruction itself. And when people are beginning to see that now, because they're seeing that it's going to make changes in their pocket, the price of their petrol, the availability of their...
People coming in have different religion, different values, and those values don't change. And they live their lives as they lived wherever they came from before, and it involves taking things freely, and including women.
Food, through the scarcity of fertilizer, the cost of living is going to go up. Governments like the Labour Party, and probably like Reform, are going to borrow more in order to defray those costs, which will further devalue the value of your money, making it harder and harder to survive. It's a death spiral. Fundamentally, the decades of regime change wars that I've seen have changed one regime more than most, and that's our own. Because I remember when we used to live in a sane, functioning, stable, and relatively happy country. And now it's terrible. And all these policies have been undertaken which have created this nightmare. And it's the political consensus that was formed after 1945 that's done this to us. And the reason why none of these parties have any answers to these problems is because they are the problem and not the solution. And if they ever name the fact that it's their policies that have caused this, they're finished. And I think reality is making that argument now.
Reality is making the argument, and that's because the media's control is failing. This reality has been there all along, except now, after COVID, Asmongold didn't cover politics 5 years ago. Now he does, and it's reaching millions. That's just an example. And so the truth is reaching millions. Reality is reaching millions. And reality is a convincing argument.
And they know they're finished. And this is why you see the elites in the United States cashing out through series of well-documented financial trades timed to statements always made on Fridays just before the markets closed, like we saw yesterday, saying that peace is coming.
I do believe there's insider trading and in the swings on market, but I know that the entire U.S. financial system is a bucket shop. Entirely. So yes, there's insider trading, but it's also just to have this survive. This insider trading, it's to prop up the financial system. Without the constant market manipulation, the U.S. financial system would collapse. Banks would go under. The dollar would crash. We've reached a point where that type of market manipulation, blatant market manipulation, is necessary just to keep the financial system going.
It is so bad that the Federal Securities Commission is investigating the President of the United States and his inner circle for insider trading now, because it's obvious. So you're ruled by something that looks very much like a fanatical crowd.
And that's the reason they're never going to prosecute anyone for this insider trading, is because the biggest parties doing the trading is the U.S. government itself. You have one party in all these derivative trades that is definitely the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the New York Fed. It's a huge player in derivative markets behind the scenes, and it's bailing itself out with this insider trading.
Crime syndicate that does things that destroys everyone's lives, makes these wonderful promises to them, whether from the left or the right. But in the end, what you get is chaos and war and open borders and mad slogans and the outright denial of reality. And it's not good enough because we have to live in the mess they made.
What's the Twitter for Frank?
Yeah, the Twitter is Frank Reiter, Righther, Frank Reiter. And inevitably, depressingly, I have a Substack. And I do videos for LifeSite News.
Well, he was a great speaker. UK needs politicians like him. This will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.